I'm Katie, a counsellor at St Elizabeth Hospice, and this audio recording comes from the LivingGrief team. This conversation is to support bereaved people and help them navigate through their grief. Today we're going to talk about how life continues after the death of someone. We will explore grief and we will look at how we cope with loss. Firstly, I would like to point out that what we talk about today comes from our experience when supporting others through their grief. It's not based on facts, figures or research, but our professional experience when working alongside bereaved people. We may, however, discuss and reflect on some well-known grief theories that have been developed by researchers over many years, as we use them to help explain someone's experience in bereavement that we have seen in our work as counsellors. We know that everyone grieves differently and no one's grief journey is the same. However, we hope to share a level of connection and understanding about grief that you might find helpful. I would like to start by introducing Sandy to help me today on this talk about rebuilding life after loss, who is a counsellor at the hospice. Welcome, Sandy.
Thank you, Katie, and thank you for inviting me today to have this talk with you.
No, thank you so much for coming today. So I'm just going to jump right in and start asking some questions and have that conversation with you. So as we mentioned, no one's grief is the same. So I was wondering about your thoughts about how grief is felt differently depending on who you've lost, such as mum, dad, sibling, child and a partner. Can it be different?
Do you mean a grief hierarchy?
I think so. I wonder if some people feel like that. I wonder if they feel that their grief should be felt more because of a certain person they've lost. Mm-hmm. And I'm just curious if that's something you've experienced.
Well, I suppose the best way to start is to say that, as you've already said, that grief is a natural emotional reaction to loss. We are all unique, and how we respond to grief is unique and affects people in different ways. The nature of the relationship you have with the person you have lost can impact on a person's grief. For example, the connection, the bond, or the love that you feel for the person who has died can deeply impact on the experience of grief. However, we don't have to have a strong connection with someone to experience grief. The death of a friend, colleague, or a neighbour, even someone you don't know or know well, can also deeply impact on the experience of grief. So really, it is about the connection, in my experience, that you have with the person that you've lost.
It's about the relationship that you have with that one.
That's right,
yeah.
The connection.
Rather than who that particular person was, it just depends on how that's going to affect you.
That's right. I think we need to be sensitive to everyone's grief. It's real, it's valid, and everyone's grief matters.
Absolutely. Everyone's grief has that meaningful moment for them.
That's right.
We should validate it for every person.
That's right.
I
Absolutely.
Really that. What kind of emotions might we feel after we've lost somebody? Because obviously we've just mentioned about how different it is for everybody. So it might be difficult to pick out certain emotions, but kind of from your experiences, what would you say is the emotions that you see?
Well, as we keep saying, it is different for everyone. Everyone's grief experience and their journey is different. There's no set pattern or right or wrong way to grieve. However, saying that, there will be some emotions that people may experience in common. So, for example, intense sorrow or deep sadness. People may experience physical symptoms of pain from the grief they are feeling. It can be a gut-clenching emotion, which can be quite debilitating. Shock, not being able to grasp what has happened, not being able to believe what's happened. Feeling numb, feeling angry, guilt, perhaps. Feeling that you've lost your life's plans, your future, or more time together. So those are sort of common things. Sometimes people may experience complicated grief, what we call complicated grief, where the feeling of loss is so debilitating and persistent, you don't improve even after a significant period of time. And people with complicated grief may find it extremely difficult to recover from their loss, or feel that they can get on with their lives. Again, it's down to the relationship and the dynamics of the family. All of those things can impact on your grief.
And when we talk about emotions, what I think is important to bring up is that we don't feel, let's say, sadness, and then not feel it again when we move on to anger, when we move on. It will go round in circles. In
Absolutely.
One day we can feel every emotion, in other days we can feel just numb, and then it goes back to anger, and then it goes back to sadness, or, and also I think it's important to bring up that we will share moments of joy.
That's right.
And to kind of give ourselves permission that is okay. It's natural for us to be able to kind of move from one place to another within our grief. But it's that kind of wave that we have to go through.
It is a wave, and as you quite rightly said, you will flip between emotions and you'll feel differently from day to day, and some days will be worse than others.
And it's really interesting when we work with people how that can be quite shocking to them. I don't understand. One day I can get up and I'm okay, and other days I can't. And actually, that's okay. That's what grief does. This is how your body is going to react to this natural response.
And I think it's quite important when those questions come up when we meet with people, because so that we can validate that grief. We can say this is a natural process of grief. This is how you are going to feel. Because sometimes people don't quite realise what they're experiencing.
When we talk about someone's emotions as well, I think when we're like a family unit, or maybe a friendship group, if you're supporting others, we tend to think we need to be strong for others. Let's perhaps not show our emotions. And I always hear, I need to be the rock for that person, which then tends to stop them from feeling their own emotions. Is there anything you could say about that? Is there anything that you think, is that helpful, like being strong for others?
I think sometimes, for example, people ask, how do I cope? How do I manage some of these emotions? Is there something that I can do? And I think, as I said, some people who have been bereaved say that they cope with their emotions, for example, by trying not to focus on their grief. They distract themselves from the feelings of grief. They keep themselves busy. They look after others. They keep themselves busy at work, etc., etc. Because they don't want to feel those emotions. They don't want to feel that gut clenching, physical emotion of their grief. So they distract themselves. As counsellors, as you know, Katie, we support and encourage people to accept their emotions. We will say to them, don't stop yourself from crying. Sit with your feeling of grief. Accept them. However, everyone's different and needs to find their own pathway through their individual grief and what is right for them. So, it's a question of, take your time. Find your own pace. It's your grief. You are an individual. We have times some people say, when we speak to them, they say friends and family expect us to have moved on.
Yes.
And they find that quite upsetting because they haven't moved on. They are still grieving. But again, it's about taking time to feel your grief. If you feel able to talk about your loss and feelings, if you can talk to friends or family or counsellors, anyone you feel comfortable speaking to, it is normal to go back and forth, as you quite rightly said, between feeling the intensity of your grief and feeling slight recovery. So, for example, you might have moments where you laugh, and then you might have another moment where you go back and feel the grief quite intensely, and that's quite normal to go from one set of feeling to another. Some people feel quite guilty about finding any joy in life after a loss, but it is quite normal to go backwards and forwards in your recovery.
I think that people tend to feel that being sad is a weakness, But I think in our work, we're encouraging people to find the strength in their feelings and to bring whatever feelings that come with that. If it's anger, if it's guilt, if it's resentment, if it's sadness, and obviously if it's joy, but to sit with those emotions is what creates our ability to build on our resilience and come to hold that in us.
That's true, and and sometimes I say and feel that sitting with grief takes courage, because there is a lot of pain in sitting with that grief, and part of what we do is to encourage people to sit with that grief and find a way through, because as you say, so many things can come out of that resilience, a way of coping with the loss. And talking is really important, so if you don't feel like talking, not everybody wants to talk to people, but if you don't feel like talking, there are other ways to express your emotions. So, this is, again, something that we encourage as well. You can write a journal, you can take time and sit with your memories, you can go through photographs, you can create a memory box, it's your experience, and those are the sort of things that will help you cope and get you through, and I found that some people go a little bit further than that in terms of coping with their grief, and they find comfort in honouring their loved one. For example, some people might put a plaque on a bench or plant a tree or do a charity run, whatever fits the person that they've lost. And they want to do something so that their loved one is remembered. And that is really so important to them. Yeah. And that often gives a lot of people comfort, and it's part of their grief journey, so that they feel, that this person mattered, this person was important to me, and I don't want anybody to forget them.
Yeah. And I think what's important for us to mention at this moment is it needs to be when people are ready. So in their time, and also to seek help when needed.
Exactly.
And it can be a professional, or it could be a friend or family.
Yes, exactly.
But as we're talking about sitting with the emotions and doing something to express it and hold the legacy of their loved one, that does need to be when they're ready, and it does need to be what's right for them, and seek help when needed.
Exactly. And I think it's really important for people to recognise when they feel that they need support. Not just to just sit there, but to actually feel that I need someone to talk to. I'm not getting through this. This is really more than I can bear. I do need someone to talk to. And as I said, it can be one of us. It can be, another therapist or counsellor, or it can just be a very good friend or somebody that you really trust. Church, anyone, anything. But it's feeling that you can express those emotions in a safe space. That's important.
Absolutely. When someone has experienced the loss of a loved one, does life feel different? Does life look different for that person?
Yes. Yes. I mean, we've talked about the connections that we have with the people that we love, the bonds and the the emotions that we have around family and friends and things. So yes, if someone's gone, it does change your life. Losing someone can leave a void in your life, which can take a long time to recover from. Many people who are experiencing grief are never the same after losing a loved one. It will change your life, affect your emotional and physical well-being. It will challenge your identity, trigger new beginnings as you find your way. So yes, life is different.
It's life-changing. It's a life-changing experience. And I think, again, what's important is to mention that doesn't always need to be that life is harder or life is worse than what it was before. We growed around our grief to create a space where life becomes in a pattern that you want it to become. But it takes time.
Yeah, so it's kind of like what you're saying is, about rebuilding your life in a sense, isn't it? So, and people trying to find their way through that grief and sort of picking up the pieces and getting on with their journey. We would, and that's really quite important. I think part of what we do, we work with people through their grief, but we also look to the future. And we always try to encourage people to put in place their own support networks, so that when our work with them has finished, they have a network of friends or community or people that they can talk through their grief. And so I think that's really important. That's part of what we do, and help people to establish a support network. As we've said before, that can be community, family, friends, groups. We have groups here. We run a bereavement group here at the hospice, and a lot of people benefit from being in a small group where people can talk about their loss and find a way through talking to other people who have had major losses in their lives as well. So groups can be quite supportive, and you don't have to come to the hospice. There are lots of groups in the community. We've got walking groups. The hospice runs walking groups. So there is part of the work is trying to support someone in picking up the pieces of their life, in looking towards the future, supporting them to just build a network of support. Because it can be quite isolating when you lose someone. I've certainly had clients where a husband or a wife has died, and all of a sudden friends drop off. You don't hear from them much or at all after the funeral. So, the friendship network has, they've lost the friendship network. And we talked at the beginning of our discussion about losses. That's another loss. Some people may lose the friendship network that they've had, friends that you went on holiday with or had round for drinks. All of a sudden, you're not getting invitations anymore because you're not a couple. So, and that can be quite upsetting to people. So I think it's, our support is about trying to get people to create a new network of support, go out and try and make new friends and create a life for themselves.
Well, you've just literally answered the next question I had for you, really, because I was just going to ask about when we rebuild our life, do we need to find people that understand? And I can really hear in what you're saying is find people you can connect with.
Yes.
And it might be the people that you had in your life before, and it might be different people, but it's being able to connect and speak out and show how you're feeling. But I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add, but I just felt like you really had already answered. Do we need to find people that understand?
Yes. And yes, we do. It helps to reconnect with perhaps new people, perhaps old, people that you've known already. But I think that's part of the rebuilding process after loss.
Okay. So when rebuilding life after loss, do we continue to think and feel about the person that has died?
Well, yes, I would say. I mean, it's normal for people to continue to think about and grieve for the person that they've lost. The connection, the bond, the love that we've already spoken about, that you had for the person that you've lost remains with you. When somebody dies, if you have a connection with them in any way, that connection remains with you, even though they've passed. So part of some of the things that we talk about is something called continuing bonds. We talk to people about continuing bonds. And this is a grief theory that supports the idea that we remain connected to the loved ones that we have lost. We don't detach from them, but keep them with us as we grieve and move on with our lives. We do this through holding on to items, things that once belonged to a loved one, maybe a locket or a watch or something. When you hold that watch, you feel connected. Sometimes people will get that little pinch of tears or that little flutter. That's the connection. And for another way to feel connected, for example, is talking to our loved ones, actually talking to our loved ones. Just saying, Mom, I miss you. Dad, oh gosh, I remember you telling me about that in the garden. Am I doing it correctly? Those sorts of things is what keeps us connected. The familiarity of places. Some clients will say, I go and sit on that bench and feel it still, because it's something that we used to do together and I feel so connected. So through continuing bonds, you can still feel connected with somebody, and that's part of the grieving process that actually helps you to get through your grief. And as I said, these types of behaviours help people to manage and cope with their grief. However, it should be noted that grief is different for everybody. Relationships are complicated, and some people may not feel continuing bonds are beneficial, because we know grief can be complicated. Family dynamics are complicated. So it may not be the right thing for everybody, but certainly continuing bonds and still feeling that connection and feeling connected with someone after they've gone does certainly help people to cope with their loss.
It takes a long time for someone to kind of shift into that place in terms of, when we first are grieving, the thought of going to sit at a bench where you'd go together would be really quite painful. But it's actually over time and with openness and people around you who understands, it's like actually I go there and I feel so connected with that person. And that shift of comfort comes in time and in experiences and people you talk to. It's that change between having someone presently with you and having that relationship with them then, and then their existence as a presence not there, but that connection's never going to go.
That's right.
It's holding on to that.
Exactly. And sometimes people say, will I ever lose this feeling? This
love,
this not. And I say, the pain of grief. And I say, well, probably not, because it's the connection. You may lose the intensity of what you're feeling at the beginning of the loss, but you may never quite lose everything, because the connection that you have with somebody may still create some sort of emotion. If you're sitting on that bench looking at peaceful waters of Felixstowe, you might have a tear. It might elicit some type of emotion. So, you always have that connection, but that connection supports you in moving forward, because you know that person is always going to be with you.
Well, because I was thinking you were talking about love rather than the pain, but that's the same, isn't it? The love never goes, and we never want it to go.
Exactly.
And we've got to do things that hold on to our emotions, our memories, our love for that person, as well as the fact that we have the pain, the intensity at the beginning, and that's what creates missing someone. And that holds our love to them.
That's right.
So it's all a combination of everything.
Well, that's right. And it doesn't matter whether, you could be going there every so often, sitting at that bench for the rest of your life, and always feel connected to the person that you lost.
I only have one more question that we can talk about today, if that's okay. And it's quite a simple one, I think, because we've kind of spoke about it. Is there a right time to make decisions? We have this conversation with clients quite a lot, and from their family members or friends will say, I should have done this at this time. And I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that. Should there be a certain time when moving items or moving house? Because sometimes you have to kind of think about your living arrangements. What do you think, or your face is saying, or Sandy?
Well, to be honest, it is a question that I've heard people have put to me now and then. And I think this is a question that some people have asked. And I think all we can do is listen. Because I feel that these decisions can only be made by the person or family who have been bereaved. So all I would say generally is facing a bereavement of a loved one is probably one of the most intensively stressful events a person can experience. And in some cases, it may affect a person's emotional and physical well-being. So you might feel quite disorientated. You might feel quite emotional at that time. And it's also a busy time. It's a time when people are making arrangements. They're, notifying authorities. Solicitors. All sorts of things are happening and are going on at that time. So generally, people need time to grieve. You need time to go through all of those things, to do all of those things, to make all of those adjustments in your life. And you need time to reflect. Once all of those things have finished, and you've had a funeral and you've done all the paperwork and all the things that you need to do, you need to have time to reflect, to ensure that any decisions that you do make are the right ones for yourselves. So I would never say to someone yes or no or anything like that. I would simply listen and talk about that, the sort of things, and because they're so busy, that they may need to have time to reflect and get through the whole process of death and funerals and things like that, and then just spend time with your grief and see where that leads you.
Well, it is about navigating through this grief, isn't it? It's about finding our way through.
That's right.
Thank you so much, Sandy, for your time today. I really hope the listeners find that really beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie, for inviting me.
If you feel that you need some bereavement support, please do get in touch with the LivingGrief Bereavement Hub by calling, emailing or checking out our LivingGrief Bereavement Hub website, which shares many services that offer bereavement support. Thank you for listening to this LivingGrief conversation.